This is a performance worksheet within the Portfolio Impact Analysis tool. There are 4 performance worksheets, one for each business line that is covered by the tool: consumer banking, business banking, corporate banking, and investment banking. You can see these at the bottom of the worksheet. The performance worksheets and the performance assessment in general is the second phase of the methodology. Whereas in the previous phase, impact identification, we were, as the name implies, identifying which impact areas are associated with the bank's different portfolios by virtue of business lines, clients, sectors, and countries of operation. In this segment, we will be moving on from potential positive and negative impacts to the significant impact areas, to trying to get a sense of what the actual impact is in reality. For this stage, what we're trying to understand is what the bank's level of performance is. It may be good, fair, poor, or we may not have quite enough information to know what the level of performance is, which will be an indication that more data collection will be needed over time. This determination is what will help to further refine what would be the priority impact areas for the bank to concentrate on. The whole of the impact analysis is, of course, for the bank to gain an understanding of which impact areas it might most meaningfully set strategies and targets against, namely for the attainment and compliance of the principles for responsible banking. Let us have a look at how this performance review is done. A number of items or data points will be requested. These data points are not necessarily to be all completed. They are also a means of ensuring that some data is compiled. In some cases, you may be able to compile all of them. In other cases, you may only be able to compile some of them. This is why there is also intermediate categories of performance where there is perhaps less data, one will say that is unknown, where we have some data, but perhaps not as much as we would like, or not as good quality. We would have a priori findings. Let us go through these data sets that we would be considering. First and foremost, note that these data sets can be collected either on a global level, should the information be tracked at that level for banks with international activities, or they can be tracked country by country. We can take a country example to start with. What you will see in this worksheet is that the most significant impact areas that were identified as a result of phase 1 have automatically carried through. And so what you're seeing horizontally at the top here are the most significant impact areas that were identified. And these are, as with the previous phase, distinguished between positive associations and negative associations. So in this particular hypothetical case, we see that inclusive and healthy economies, housing, mobility, justice, should be understood as justice and equality, have been identified as the most significant impact areas for the consumer banking portfolio in this particular country. That is in terms of positive impacts. In terms of negative impacts, resource efficiency, climate, economic convergence have been identified as areas where there may be the most significant negative impacts. In order to get a sense of actual impacts, here are the data sets that are looked at. First of all, the question is asked as to what kinds of indicators are being tracked and that may give us an indication of actual impact. There is a possibility to capture indicators that would be quantitative in nature. That is here, for instance, on line 48, and also a possibility to capture qualitative data or comments. A number of examples have been inserted here. These, however, are just examples. The tool does not provide a determined set of impact indicators or metrics. The tool refers you to frameworks which have done this, i.e. to determine specific impact indicators and metrics, and a few examples being extracted here. In future versions, we will have a more complete library from which you will be able to pull, and this library will likewise be based on the resources that have been signaled here for now. Where the indicators that you are tracking or able to track are quantitative indicators, further questions are asked in terms of the specific metric, the unit, and of course, value. If these are qualitative indicators, then these will obviously be presented in narrative form. Up to 5 different indicators are allowed for here per impact area, but further indicators can be added if needed. This is the first type of data that is requested. What the other data types are more of the nature of benchmarks. So these are basically comparative elements. So firstly, there is a question in terms of how the bank is performing relative to peers. You may be participating in benchmarks or in indices or in ratings where you've been compared vis-a-vis your peers, if we're talking consumer banking. And the position of your bank vis-a-vis the others could be taken as an indication of performance. Obviously, this is a contextual piece of information. More importantly, the benchmark that you may wish to track and which you are invited to provide more information on is point C here on line 59, where you would be comparing your actual quantitative and qualitative data from the beginning to policy goals and targets that would have been set on a scientific and regulatory basis. Examples that come to mind are, of course, the climate agreements, and an example of a specific interpretation with thresholds specifically spelled out for different sectors would be the EU taxonomy. Such policy and regulatory guidance is not necessarily available, however, to all the different impact areas. And so this may be a piece that you are not able to fill out for all of the different impact indicators that you have identified. Where they do exist, this would, however, of course, be of particular value in terms of your further prioritization and target setting. Finally, with this information, a final piece is included here to reflect on presence or not of any recent and significant controversies, which can be another partial proxy to understanding performance. But again, really the core here are the indicators at the beginning and the benchmarking against policy and regulatory targets. Other items have been added as approximations so that you're able to glean at least some information and some indication of performance and to build up this section progressively over time. Based on the information that you have been able to collect, you are invited to provide a conclusion as per the beginning of the explanation, whereby you can either select that performance is good, poor, fair, unknown, or a little bit in between, where you have some information that gives you an initial sense, but not a firm grounding as yet. The table from the beginning, I will scroll back up to show you, gives you an indication of which of these qualifications would apply depending on the availability of first-hand data, the peer benchmarking, the policy alignments, and controversies. You can see which one would apply. There is also space for comments at the bottom, which is highly recommended that you use in order to further explain, document, and comment on your findings. As said, this exercise is repeated on a country basis, but can also be done on a global basis where there might be indicators or items that you're tracking on a global basis if your bank is operating in several countries, and you can mix and match between the two. As said, this is something that is done individually, business line by business line. Once this has been done and that you have reached your conclusions on the level of performance, you may consult the final worksheet of the workflow and of this second phase, naturally, which is the worksheet called Priority Impact Areas. As you can see, this worksheet is a replica of the most significant impact areas worksheet, where again, you're seeing a dashboard of all the different business lines with a global and a country by country perspective and with the breakdown by positive and negative associations. The impact areas that are selected in each case are the same ones that you would have selected for the most significant impact areas. What will change as you determine your level of performance is the color coding, whereby where performance is found to be good, you will find your impact areas to show in green, and where your performance shows that your performance analysis shows that current performance seems to be fair or poor, basically where there is still room for improvement, the impact area will show in red. Where there is insufficient information, the impact area will remain in black, as in this example here. And this indicates a need to further document and find ways to trace impact performance for this particular impact area. On this basis, you should have a collection of data and a dashboard that indeed enables you to make a selection of the impact areas that you may wish to prioritize, including on the basis of a better understanding of how the impact areas relate to each other. And on that basis, you will also be moving to target setting with, of course, the benefits of having a good documentation of your current baseline or what you know about your current baseline.